I am now live. Hey, so I'm getting excited about a session that I'm running this week, and I just think we should all know this. There's a lot of, maybe it's just because of my age and it's what's showing up in my feed, but there's a lot of people hopping on to talk about menopause and perimenopause and symptoms and things that go on. I wanted to draw your attention to something. How well you move through menopause can be a report card on what's going on in your body if you really think about it. And there's a couple of reasons why. This is particular to explore how stress and inflammation play a role in how you move through menopause. So part of what's going on in the scenario, so the biochemistry of the stress response in the body is the exact same biochemistry of the inflammatory response in the body. So whether you are stressed because the world is a gong show right now, whether you are stressed because you don't know if you're going to have a job next week, whether you are stressed for other things where like some of the bodily functions aren't working, for example, if you're having a hard time digesting, if your liver's having a hard time detoxifying, it's detoxifying all the time. There's so many different reasons of why the internal stuff might not be working well. If your blood sugars are really tricky to balance, then you're going to be triggering that stress response all the time. If you've got emotional stress, let me ask you a question. Are you alive? I mean, I'm being flippant about it, but I think the emotional stress is also a really big piece that we think of when we say the word stress. But more than that, right? Any kind of stress you have in any of the relationships in your life, people, coworkers, children, adults, people that you're caring for, if you have a neurodivergent child where there's a lot, or a child with special needs where you need a lot of extra support, there's a lot of extra appointments to get to and all these things, right? All of these pieces all add up to driving that inflammatory response in the body. And I call it the burden of stress because it's kind of that amalgamation of everything over the course of your life. And when it comes to menopause and that middle-age time that we find ourselves in, many of us right now, it's a part of why it feels like, I always say this with clients, it's like, the universe puts her hands on your shoulders and she goes, I wasn't messing around. And I feel like menopause is really that time of, like, there's a reason this all happens. We're not broken. There's so many things I could say about this, but it's really principally the universe putting her hands on my shoulder saying, I meant what I said. Get her done, get your work done, and get to it because we need you and we need the work and the light that you bring to this world. So for anybody who's finding themselves moving through perimenopause, north of 38, 39 years old, anywhere in your 40s, anywhere in your early 50s, where like the symptoms of perimenopause are really kicking your butox, as we say at our house. Excuse me. As I hiccup and burp all at the same time because I get excited. Anyway, there's a really big reason why this ramps up in this stage of life. Why do we get so many more symptoms at this stage of life? Because part of what's happening is your adrenals are taking over the production of some of the hormones that you typically need when you've got a female body. And the adrenals take over this function because the ovaries are shutting down. That's the basic gist of it. And moving into menopause, if your adrenals were struggling going in, oh baby, menopause is going to be even harder. So that's a big part of why so many of us have this difficult time through the menopause transition. And the more you can work at reducing all of that overall burden of stress you've got going on, the easier time you will have of moving through the menopause transition. And it's not really like, it's not that you've done anything wrong. It's not, I think there's no one who would have, if you drive a car for 50 years, there's no one who's going to be unscathed and not have scratches and dents and bumps and things along the way. Like, of course we are. And we fully expect it. But when we get to this middle age, so many of us, and this is the majority of my clients are females in this transition period. So many of us, some of our symptoms ramp up. There's another big reason for this. So because the majority of my clientele is dealing with inflammation, chronic disease, histamine, or mast cells issues, in this transition, because so much work now gets put and added onto your adrenals, now your adrenals have a longer to-do list. And if your adrenals to-do list is too long for your adrenals to get to, she will start to sound the alarm earlier and earlier and sooner and sooner. What shows up when that happens? Histamine issues. To add insult to injury, and I don't know if it's insult to injury, it's just the biochemistry of how it works, but histamine released in the body further drives some of the symptoms. Oh, it's like a snowball going down the side of a mountain. Histamine, when you have, so in this transition through menopause, your hormones shift, yeah? Everything drops, like everything really drops. And the balance and ratio between things in female bodies, we're supposed to vacillate over the course of 28 days between two major hormones. There are many other players. But to simplify things, before you go into menopause, you are shifting between estrogen and progesterone. And as you shift through into the menopause years, now your adrenals are going to make DHEA instead of progesterone, and the estrogen as well. There's a role to play in all of this. It's all connected. So when they dip, first of all, that's going to drive some of the symptoms. Naturally occurring dips, they're supposed to happen. In addition to this, because we tend to really drop the progesterone and we have a struggle making DHEA, do you know that progesterone and DHEA both put the brakes on histamine release in the body? So for a lot of us who are moving through menopause and perimenopause and really struggling with symptoms, or histamine issues ramp up and get worse, it is infinitely tied to the hormonal shifts that are happening in the body. And now the ramping up of those symptoms is the universe putting her hands on our shoulders going, I wanted you to look after things and take care of yourself, and now you kind of don't have another option. We really actually need you to look after yourself and stop outsourcing some of this stuff to other people, to other companies. Like, do the work to look after yourself. And many of us start to come around to doing this work in our 40s and 50s. And I am one of those people. Leading up to the age of 42, my symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And at the age of 42, thinking I went to holistic nutrition school. I was 40 when I started, 41 when I graduated. And at that stage, a lot of shifts are happening, and my symptoms were indeed getting worse and worse. And I had done many different medication things along the way because of these symptoms I was having. And somebody mentioned to me at some point, I had already gone to nutrition school, and said, geez, I wonder if it's histamine that's driving all of your symptoms. Looked into it, and sure enough, that was what was going on. And histamine issues ramp up naturally in perimenopause because of that hormonal shift that happens. Estrogen also prods your body to release more histamine. So if you are more out of balance, then you are going to feel those histamine symptoms potentially even more. And not just histamine, but inflammation and all of the symptoms you can tie into what we sort of equate to menopause and that transition time. So at the age of 41, I go to school. I know we talked about histamine, but I don't remember it ever ringing a bell or hitting or where it felt like, oh, this is me. It wasn't until after I'd graduated and I went to a cooking class in Colorado with the lovely Monica Corrado with some Calgary pals. And it was somebody from our group who said, oh, your symptoms sound like you've got histamine issues. That was the door for me that opened and made me see how much was impacting everything. And the histamine piece was the common denominator with my OCD tendencies and my anxiety that I was diagnosed with, and there was like a depression diagnosis that I've now erased from my mind because I don't want to take it on, and it doesn't feel like it was mine. I also had painful cramps. I also had migraines. I had pins and needles and a bunch of different symptoms all over my body that I had tried to address in many different ways. Reflux, a bunch of different things. Eczema, hives, hay fever, you name it. So many symptoms. And as I was getting into those early 40s, that was ramping up and going fast forward. when I started to address the histamine issues, I did it through actually reducing inflammation. I never truly went low histamine 100%. I actually worked at reducing inflammation in my body before I understood how this all worked. And through it all, developed a low histamine approach with my pal Tracy Reed. We are the two over at Histamine Haven. And the low histamine approach is meant to help you in the moment when you first figure out the histamine piece, but it's not a long-term sustainable thing necessarily. It can be for some of us for sure. But to me, it's more important to actually address that histamine piece first, but really work at lowering inflammation everywhere in the body. And how do we do that? We actually reduce your burden of stress, because the stress response in the body is the same as the inflammation response in the body. The more inflammation you've got, the more you're going to drive the internal burden of stress. That's going to prod the external burden of stress of things you can't control, and the emotional burden of stress where you're struggling with relationships with others in your life. So I'm saying all of this to let you know that, yeah, there's HRT. We live in an amazing time, and I think there's brilliant evidence and super qualified people who are talking about this. That's not what I talk about. And I'm not saying do it or don't do it. I'm saying I can't actually speak to do it or don't do it because it's not my area of expertise. Where my area of expertise is with food. Well, food is what people make at home most of the time. Yeah, a lot of us eat out, sure. And the more I was eating out, the more my symptoms got worse. And a lot of what I've had to do is really rein things in and change how we cook at home and how we eat at home. And it's made a monstrous difference, to the point where I am turning 52 next week. And the only symptoms I have through perimenopause are thinning of hair. Oh, and like the muffin top. I have the best muffin top in town. I've had that for 30 years. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay to be soft. And I know that it's a sign that there's some metabolic things perhaps struggling. But I got to tell you, everything else, including all of the histamine issues that I've had along the way, are for the most part, 95% of the time resolved. And that is because I've addressed it through reducing inflammation. I haven't addressed it through... Not true. I do address through reducing histamine high foods when I have symptoms. That's the only time I really go low histamine. And as a result, here I am at 52 almost, moving through this transition, and maybe I'll eat my words in 2 years. Maybe I'll say, oh my gosh, I'm having the worst symptoms. At which point, then I'll ramp up the supports I put in place. But I must tell you, at the age of 52, I feel better than I did at 41 when I graduated from nutrition school. Because of all of the work I've done over the last 10 years, I find myself shifting through this menopause shift with comfort, with ease. I'm not stressed about it. I also recognize that I don't have those really big symptoms. And once those massive symptoms that we associate through menopause, the hot flashes, the mood disturbances, the sleep troubles are massive. And that now just kind of knocks everything out. I get it. I totally get it. Over the years, part of the work I've done is to really focus on prioritizing sleep and doing what I can and what is within my own capacity to address, while I can, to improve my own sleep. And I did it starting at 41. I'm not new to this. I'm not a young spring chick. I haven't been doing this for yonks. I have the great good fortune that my mom cooked homemade meals from scratch for the first 18 years of my life, until I thought she was full of beans and I started to cook packaged foods because they tasted way better. And I thought, who does she think she is? Oh my God, I'm going to eat my words for the rest of my life with what I thought at the age of 16 and 17. What do you mean cooking from scratch? Nobody wants to do that. Oh God, my mom knows nothing. Rolled my eyes. Ha! Whips. The age, my late 20s late 20s was when I started to figure out what I ate was driving my symptoms. How I ate was driving my symptoms. So while I did some shifts in my late 20s, early through my 30s, it wasn't until my 40s when I really addressed the histamine issue through reducing inflammation. And now I feel better than I've ever felt in the rest of my life. Yep, I got aches and pains and things. I've also had car accidents and sledding accidents and skating accidents and bike accidents. And I'm a little bit of a walking booby trap to myself. But my mood is really good. And when it struggles, I know what I need to put in place. And I have the great good fortune also and privilege of being in a place in my life where I'm able to put some of those other supports that cost money. I was able to put them in place when I was really, really struggling. And those tools that were imparted in those sessions and in the time and the investment I put in at the time, because it wasn't all covered, that has served me well. And I continue to use those tools, and I'm grateful for those tools. But here I find myself at 52, and the menopause shift is real, and I am seeing some symptoms, but I feel I am managing them with good ease. And I know that when and if these symptoms start to ramp up, I know that I have other options, but I know that I am doing all that I can within my own power with how I eat, the frequency at which I eat, how I work with my body, the things I prioritize, and the role that stress plays more than anything in my life. The role of stress, the stress response is what has driven me more than anything in this life and my symptoms. And that is where a lot of my work lies for me, is to continually, every day on a day-to-day basis, address the stress response and work at it within myself. So I say all of this to tell you that there's a lot at your disposal if you're struggling with symptoms. There's a lot at your disposal that you can put in place. And everybody's to-do list is going to look different. I can help. Yeah, of course. Of course I can. And I have many different things at the ready to help you with. So if ever you want to start putting some pieces in place for yourself, reach out. Let's have a conversation. I have recipe subscription services that can do the monthly reminder of, like, you said you were going to get into the real food. $5 a month, super, super affordable. I have classes where you can start to implement some of those to-do pieces for yourself based on whatever is driving your symptoms. And in our conversation, we would figure that out. That's part of what I do. I help you figure out. I also have the network. So if you are in particular moving through menopause and finding it really, really tricky, if your symptoms have been ramping up and they were wiggly, niggly little things that you were like, it's not that bad when I was 38. It's not that bad when I'm 27. And here you are at 47 going, oh my God, I think I'm going to pull my hair out through menopause. Then come and join us in the Good Food Network. That's all we're doing. We're only talking menopause and menopause symptoms in March and in April. In March, we're focusing on the adrenals. In April, we're going to be focusing on the role the liver plays in it. So if you need help with any of these things, please reach out, send me a message, and let's get a conversation going. I love what I do. It's a delicious way to move through the world. No one's here forever. Bless it, get on with it, and let's make it fun while we're here, for fart's sake. Okay, I love you, bye.